imposter syndrome, struggles with confidence? Are these things that you've tackled at some point in your journey or in your career? Have you wondered how on earth you overcome them and keep going? Well, today's conversation with my guest is going to show you how even somebody who flies at breakneck speeds above the ground to protect our country has also suffered from imposter syndrome. Stay tuned.
You're listening to The Brand Compass, conversations to navigate your way to building a brand fit for purpose and poised for success. Here's your host, 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗢𝗘.
Hello there, my friend, and welcome back if you're a returning listener, and if you're new to the show and to me, I'm Shelley. I'm your host on this conversational journey. This is the spot on the net where we get together and we unpick all the ways in which our personal brands meet the humans we serve. Today, we're adding to my series of conversations that I've been having with people from all kinds of walks of life and fields of expertise to ask how they're faring, shaping a version of themselves that they're happy to share with the outside world and what that looks and feels like for them. And my word, do I have a cracker for you today. We are entering the world of fast jets meets leadership development. I feel like I'm starting a movie. I'm too excited. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce my guest and then we can jump straight into the conversation. So Helen Seymour is the first female Eurofighter Typhoon pilot with more than 20 years of fighter pilot experience in the RAF. She's been involved in delivering air defence in the form of quick reaction alert called QRA to the UK, the Falklands, and for NATO in the Baltic states. And she served on the operations as part of the liberation of Libya and taken part in and held the role of mission commander in many multinational exercises worldwide. Before she retired from the RAF, her final role was as the evaluator pilot on the Typhoon Test Squadron, responsible for the safe and effective introduction of the new equipment and capability to the war fighter on the Typhoon Force. This included, just to give you context, missile firing, weapon dropping, and many complex and highly pressured radar, avionic, and test profiles. She was also the lead pilot for the Typhoon Defence AIDS system. And after retiring from the RAF a few years ago, she partnered up with her friend Rosie, who was a navigator on some of those earlier missions, and they run their training and speaking business called On a Mission. And we're going to get into that a bit today. Helen lives a much less pressurized life on the ground with her daughter, two stepdaughters, and her fiancé Ben in Lincoln. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. I don't know whether having three girls is less pressurised, but
I thought it's not less stressful, but at least you're not in the air with people shooting
no,
at
that's
you.
true. They keep me firmly on the ground.
Very much do. Right. So just for the benefit of our listeners, Helen, do you want to give us a little bit of your backstory to how you got to do the work that you're doing today, and then we can kind of lead into how that RAF experience is feeding into your work today?
Yeah. So I first became interested in sort of flying in the Air Force when I was a child. I joined the Air Cadets when I was at school. And I said to my mum, this is what I want to do. And I went and did the tests and I failed. I was, gobsmacked. I think it's a really good life lesson to fail. And it was the first time I'd really failed at something that I was genuinely passionate about. So we sort of went back to the drawing board and Mum said, well, you still want to be in the Air Force. You love science. Why don't you go and maybe be a doctor? So I decided that was it. I wanted to be a doctor in the Air Force. So I went to university to read medicine. And when I was there, I joined the University Air Squadron. And funny thing happened. I received positive discrimination. I'm going to be completely honest with you, because I was about the only girl that joined that year that had long enough arms to fly jets, because you have to have, limbs of a certain length to be able to reach all the switches. And the Air Force are really honest. They said, look, we need to make the quotas. We don't have enough, females on our books. Would you like to do it? And I realised that was it. I'd always wanted to do that. That was my passion. This was my second chance. So took the test again, passed, had the conversation with my mum about, not wanting to be a doctor. And I think she was a bit gutted, and she still blames me for her grey hairs. But, just thought I've got to go and do it. This is my dream. And I think you've got one shot on this planet. And I decided to take it. So went for it, and I guess the rest is history. So I was really lucky, but also, I'm really pleased that I did follow my heart rather than my head at that time.
Now, your career journey is quite long, and you had lots of stories, And I'm going to just tell everybody you were on another show called AMX for...
Air
Oh my
chats,
gosh.
that's it, yeah.
Air chats for AMX with Sam, right? And what I'm going to do is pop that in the notes, because I think if anybody wants to dig in, because you've got loads of stories, I really loved listening to that episode. So I'm going to put it in there. But you got to a point where you got injured, right? From the long, long G-force. Tell us a little bit about how that then ended up you moving out of the RAF.
Yeah, so I mean, the physiological stress that you're under whilst flying a jet is not to be underestimated. I mean, the Typhoon can pull 9G, so you're physically 9 times heavier than you would be on the ground, and more importantly, your head is. And then when you add that to wearing a helmet and trying to look around and weaponeer and look for threats, your neck just takes a lot of strain. And unfortunately, it got to the point where my neck just gave up, really. And I mean, I was totally gutted, because if I'm honest, I think it was a real knock to my ego. I'd been a fighter pilot for 20 years. It was my identity. I was cool. I felt invincible. And then suddenly I wasn't. So for me, it was a real dark point. I think it's probably overstating it, but I really struggled with it for a while, because I kind of felt I'd lost who I was. But, change is always hard. Sometimes, people fear change, and I'm no different. But I think sometimes you've just got to accept the inevitable, that it's coming, and you've got to look at those, the positives and opportunities. And there is no way that I would be speaking to you, doing things like this, starting my business with Rosie, if I was still in the Air Force. So, there's always that opportunity, even though sometimes you feel like you've got to go through a dark place to then sort of come out the other side.
While you're on that, because there was this, not luckily, I mean, it was gutting that you could no longer fly, right? But you had a period of time where you had a bit of adjustment, at least, to almost kind of get yourself through no longer being able to go up in the planes. Talk us through that 2-year period where you actually had at least a staged exit, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, I think I knew it was coming, because obviously the last few months when I was flying, I was starting to get headaches, which we now know is unfortunately due to the neck injury. And it was starting to, be quite painful. And it just got to the point where I sort of had to hold my hand up and say, I don't think I can do this anymore. Or at least I really need some attention, because this is, getting bad. And I think at some point you've got to accept that, being a fighter pilot's really cool, but I wanted to be able to pick my daughter up. I wanted to be able to bounce on the trampoline with her. There's other more important, aspects of my life. And yes, I do. I was sort of grounded, is the term, where you end up sort of stopping flying. And then I had a bit of time when I was on the ground where I was at least still able to pull on the rope. And it did give me that chance to sort of come to terms with the fact that I wasn't flying, but I was still able to instruct on the ground. I was still able to go in the simulator, until the point at which they said, right, we are going to medically discharge you, because you're now no longer fit for service.
Yeah.
And I think I'd kind of got, I think it was a sort of a two-staged approach. I think I'd got over the fact that I wasn't going to fly, but then, everyone that joins the military does to serve their country. They have sort of like this feeling of duty. And so then hearing again, oh, you're no longer fit for service, that's almost another sort of, not. So that again was a bit hard, but, I was lucky. I had a few months after that just to sort of come to terms with that, readjust to being a civilian, because I'd never really known what that was like since the age of, 17 or 18. And that really helped me, I think, that time, to just sort of stop, not have to worry about running around with your hair on fire at 600 miles an hour, and actually think, what do I want to do? Where do I want to now take the second part of my life? Because even though I've served 20 odd years, I've hopefully still got another sort of 40 years of life left. So there was it was a real sort of, right, stop, where are we going to go from here moment.
For sure. So now there's a big part of what was, part of your DNA as a fighter pilot was this debrief process that you used to have to almost do on a daily, if not weekly basis. And it's probably worth for our listeners to kind of hear a little bit about, the little bit about how that actually worked, because actually it is feeding into the work that you're doing today. And you're also still training future fighter pilots because you have a contract to do that work as well. So what is nice is you still get to tap into that identity a bit and still put on the little suit and everything.
I feel really lucky. Yeah, I'm lucky to do that because I don't think I'm ready to be a full civilian yet. So I've sort of, given
like
myself
to put it on now and again.
stepping stone approach.
Yeah. So debriefs. Tell us a bit about that.
The debrief is huge, and actually Rosie and I speak about it quite a lot. I mean, you say that we would debrief on a daily basis. We would debrief every trip. It was something we did. It wasn't even, a concept that we would land and then not debrief because it was that sort of ingrained. And it's funny because we speak to a lot of, businesses out there and they just don't do that because it's just not in their work cycle. And yet we always say to them, well, how can you hope to improve for the next event? I know it's really busy going from one event to another. We're all time pressured. But how can you start another project without learning the lessons
from the last one?
From the previous project? And I think there's sometimes this mentality that a debrief is a bit of a witch hunt and it's always looking at the negatives and it's like, oh, we failed or you made a mistake. But a debrief isn't about blame. It's about learning. And it's a chance for everyone to just take stock, be open and honest about their own performance and allow everyone else in that debrief to then also learn for it. So it's actually a really altruistic thing to do. And it's really the only way that you'll ever improve as a team. So we try to sort of encourage businesses to give their teams that time, at least even just half an hour to just sit down and just talk openly and honest about how things went, what they may change, but also what went well. Because that's often, I think as humans, we're sometimes really bad at saying well done. And I think, you need to take the good, the bad and the ugly forward so that you can then improve for the next event, task, meeting, business deal, whatever it may be.
For sure. And I feel like as parents even, we could take this mantle on for ourselves and help the future world out a bit. Because I feel like if we start to teach our young adults how to be able to take constructive feedback and have a willingness to learn and improve, we could potentially help the future world.
Such a strong generation. I mean, I always say to Lee, she stamps her feet when she gets something wrong, and it's like I've never really told her that making a mistake is bad. In fact, I've always said, look, you learn far more from things that don't run on rails, and maybe that when you do make a mistake, than when everything's perfect. And like I said right at the start, I learned a lot from that experience of failure, how to just put that as a stepping stone, as a a tool in my toolbox to fall back on. And I think that trying to teach your kids, I mean, it's difficult when they're gutted that they've got something wrong or they failed a little test or something, but you've really got to encourage them to go, look, you've got to see this as a positive because it's the best way to learn. But it's hard.
Yeah, and I have noticed with my daughter's 15, but what I've also noticed is when she does really well, she scoffs it off and go, oh no, it was easy. I was like, yeah, but it's easy because you're strong in it. So that part you need to embrace and go, oh, actually, I did really well and I did well because actually I'm strong in it.
Because of this wall of evidence that I have built about my own ability and my confidence. And I think that's also really good because, I don't know about you, but I've definitely suffered from imposter syndrome throughout my career. And I think that maybe if I'd had a bit more of backing myself earlier on, then I would probably have gone on to maybe not suffer with that as much, because I would have, taught myself that actually negative feedback isn't necessarily how I want to spin it. It wasn't lucky that I got that job. It was because I had this qualification and that qualification and I was experienced and the right person to do it. So I think it will help them in the long run.
For sure. So I'm interested a little bit in how you transferred that fighter pilot skill set over to the training and the workshops that you're doing today with clients. But for the benefits of the listeners first, you want to give them a little bit of perspective as to the kinds of clients and the traits of their work environments, because you do team training, but everyone's probably going, but she's a pilot. What does she know about team? Over to you, Helen.
No, that's it. Well, like you said, Rosie and I started on a mission. We've only been going 18 months and it's just been a whirlwind. It's been fantastic. And we started off, I mean, we are speakers. We give keynote speeches, but actually it's really fantastic that afterwards a lot of people say, oh, can you maybe look at this in a bit more detail and delve deeper, and then we can create workshops. And I think there's a lot of challenges that teams face right now when they're trying to be, I mean, everyone's got to be a high performing team. They need to be agile. They need so many tools in their toolbox. And I think there are so many relatable
traits from you being a pilot
tools and lessons that you can take. It's not just from the cockpit. It's also just as valid in a business meeting. So communication, building trust in your teams, having a wingman, someone that's got your back. And it doesn't matter whether you're having missiles fired at you or whether you're having some really tough questions in a meeting where millions of pounds are at stake. Both of those stressors would
feel the same to the body, don't they?
Provoke the same stress response in you. And I think, so therefore it doesn't matter whether in a cockpit or not, actually it's all very relatable, and how you deal with that pressure. You can use tools that we teach in either environment. So I think that's sort of how we make it relatable. And I think it's funny afterwards, people go, crikey, I didn't think that some of this would land so well, because I thought it was just going to be a unique story and that would be inspiring, but not actually useful. And
nice.
Actually, it really, really is. There's so many read acrosses.
And you mentioned there was also a few of your clients that are almost, you categorize them as safety critical, so rail, gas,
absolutely, yeah,
things like that.
Yeah, and oil and gas. We've been doing a lot of work with the railways. And, communication in those industries are key. Getting it right first time, is super important to the safety or high risk industries. So particularly in those areas, there's a lot of read across. We've done some work with Formula One as well, and talking about, young female drivers in particular, breaking into this business and what have you. And I think that, the things that we face, the challenges that we faced are going to be absolutely concurrent with what they're going to have to deal with as well. So it's brilliant that there's so much commonality between the industries. Yeah.
Lovely. And then it's a unique story, which makes you guys stand out quite a bit in terms of your value proposition, which is lovely.
Yeah. Well, it's nice because we genuinely are each other's wingman, and we were a crew. And you've got to have Rosie didn't have flying controls in the back cockpit, so she literally put her life in my hands. So there's that sort of that trust. Just implicit trust between us, and how do you get to that stage? How do you build that trust? And that's quite interesting. A lot of businesses come to us and say, how can we build that trust within our team? Because then trust is the sort of center, and then you sort of build out from capability and capacity and just productivity from there, really.
So if we swivel the lens a little bit now, so you said about 18 months, so almost 2 years, you and Rosie have been out, and you've been trying to market yourselves, market your business, learn all these other skills and that. And obviously you've talked a lot about your strong sense of duty when you were working in the RAF and that, and it's quite a tricky moving to civilian life. So you said a little bit earlier, but what has it been like for you now to be, Helen Seymour, as opposed to Helen the fighter pilot?
I know. It in a way, it's really alien, because during your career, there are obviously reasons why you wouldn't shout about who you are and what you do. Certainly, there are security reasons for that. There are people that maybe disagree with what you're doing, or have real sort of fundamental views that disagree with your role in certain areas of that job. So actually, for the past 20 years, I've never really spoken to anyone about what I've done. And actually, if anything, you're sort of encouraged not to. Oh, bless you. Because it's just better that way. So the biggest leap for me has been putting myself out there. Social media, I haven't been on social media in years. Just seeing my name written somewhere is still quite alien. So this whole concept of marketing yourself is, it's still new. I'm still finding my feet. I think it's quite tricky. There's lots to learn. Literally every day is a school day. I would say that's been the, biggest jump for me.
I think owning your business anyway.
And networking,
means
just it's you sort of start off with this sort of feeling of, oh God, are they going to think ill of me if I sort of contact them? But now it's like, give me your email address, give me your name, I want to get in touch. It's just that it's that sort of proactive nature of contacting and connecting with people, which is completely alien to me. I'm getting there. But that's been the biggest leap, I think, for me.
Takes practice, doesn't it? So you've got your business brand that the two of you are working on, but obviously there's Helen Seymour as well. So what do you think the definition, or how would you describe personal brand? And how do you feel like you're faring in terms of, you've said a little bit already, like it's uncomfortable and I'm trying to figure this damn situation out. But what would you say the definition of personal brand is? Before you actually left the RAF, there are so many recognizable people just within your field that would have had personal brands or reputation that was recognizable. So how would you describe it? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a concept that's quite new to me, but I guess it's your own identity, isn't it? And what sort of people know you for. I mean, that's probably a very naive way of defining it. But I think that aside from, I think what I want to try and do is put aside the fact that I was one of only a few female pilots, because obviously that gives you your sort of own identity in its own right.
Yeah.
But, and Rosie and I do touch on that because it is quite a big part of our military life that we were in such a predominantly male environment, and a lot of people find that very
perspective, though.
interesting.
I think it's important to keep repeating it because it gives perspective.
It does give perspective, and I guess it does, highlight the kind of people that we sort of became. I think it was a huge influence of how you act and how you hold yourself and how you conduct yourself. But for me, personal brand, I mean, I think obviously I guess if I'm honest, I still dine out on a bit that I was a fighter pilot, but I guess I kind of feel like that was my identity and that was my personal brand. And I did that as Helen, very specifically, not a female Helen. I always went to work,
as Helen,
I'm just Helen, the fighter pilot. I'm going to come here and do the best job I can. It's irrelevant whether I'm a man or a woman. I'm just going to do the job. And I think what was really nice is the guys definitely sort of picked up on that, and we were all just, mates. There was no sort of her and
gender
him
situation
sort of thing. It wasn't an issue because everyone was just there to do a job. So I'd say that's sort of part of my personal brand as well. And I think it's a difficult one because, like I said, I'm still sort of finding my way, but I want to be very honest. I think honesty is probably, maybe sometimes brutally honest. Rosie will probably say with my, we debrief each other. We're each other's wingman. We've got each other's back. And it's like, if you do a bad job, we will tell each other.
Yeah.
But I like that as part of my personal brand. I pride myself on being brutally honest with my own performance, as well as others sometimes.
But I think that comes, that's
part. It gives you authenticity.
That comes down to your values and your principles. So regardless of what work you're doing, that will always, pull you through almost like your moral compass. So regardless of what label people put on you, that they'll be identifying you by your values and your principles. So
I agree. And I think that as a speaker is kind of your personal brand, because I guess, when you boil it down, you are sort of selling yourself. And I think you've got to be honest, authentic and believable. And I think if you try and be someone you're not, it just never will work.
It's exhausting.
So I think your values and, I think... And I hope that comes across. I mean, I don't know, right? So,
no, you do.
I would say that's my personal brand.
Yeah,
being myself.
Yeah, and I think some of the testimonials that you've shared on LinkedIn, some of it, you do share them now and again of people where you've either gone and done a workshop or, I think that's where your proof will come. Your evidence will, is going to be the words that other people say, and if they actually match the perception that you're wanting to get out there, then you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I hope so, because, there is a tendency probably to think, wow, anyone that's a pilot or something, it's like, gosh, they must get it right all the time. They must be so confident, they must be so together. And I think it's quite nice for them to hear that I did suffer from imposter syndrome. I think I probably still do. No one's infallible, are they? And
no one's immune to the imposter syndrome.
Exactly. And, sometimes you have to just come across as confident, and you've got this, and you're, in turmoil inside going, oh my God, do I have this? I think I do. And I think it's okay to admit that, I think that's a good part of leadership. And when you're trying to relate and speak to an audience and sort of make it relatable, I think they really pick up on that, because they're probably going, wow, well, if she's happy to admit that, then so can I.
For sure. You've got a really nice way that you explain how to build confidence with your confidence wall. Do you want to talk us through your little, so if anybody's listening who's struggling to kind of stand up and say how good they are at what they're doing, and your little description of how to build your confidence, I quite like that. Share it with us.
I'll probably never be able to say it as well as I did the first time.
Just go for it.
Well, I just kind of think, excuse me, you just got to break it down into really small achievements. So if you just think of all the things that make you the person you are, and then you think about all the things that you've done and your experiences and your qualifications, and not necessarily even just a formal qualification, but somewhere where you got, I did that really well, and therefore, and I'm going to take that as a qualification of mine. And you sort of, those are little bricks that you can then start building and putting on top of each other to build this wall. So whenever you feel like, you don't feel good enough for the job, or you don't feel like they've picked the right person, that's probably bordering into imposter syndrome, or where you just think, crikey, I shouldn't be able to do this, I don't have the confidence. Actually, then you can fall back on this wall and go, well, actually, I can go onto that brick on that wall, because I've got these 3 layers of the wall, which show me that I can absolutely do this because I've done it before, or this equals that means that I can do it, and I should be at that level. So that's how I like to do it. Everyone's going to have different methods.
I think it's a nice metaphor.
Even if it means you write it down and you visualize it, sometimes that's a nice way of doing it. But it's just reminding yourself that you have done amazing things, and you do have that wall and often it's evidence for yourself rather than evidence for
other people.
Other people. I think you're always your own worst critic, aren't you? And I think it's nice to have that every so often, revisit it, and then go, well, actually, I can put another brick on that wall and make it even higher, so that I can now step up to a higher level, if that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that very well.
No, you have. And there was something else you said to me in our prep conversation which really stuck with me, and that was this bit about a dangerous pilot is one who's only ever flown where everything went fantastically well, and I think if people can keep that in their head, explain that a bit for us.
Yeah, so like I've said a couple of times now, I'm really grateful for that time that I failed, because you need to know what it's like to fail. Because if you get through your entire life, course, whatever it is, and you've never failed, the time that you then fail hits you so much harder than if maybe you'd stumbled a couple of times on the way. I mean, Rosie and I speak about the fact that we would sometimes welcome the trips that didn't go so well, because we would learn so much more. We'd learn more about how we coped with it, and how we dealt with the extra pressure. And if the people that I saw struggle the most were those that had not struggled, if that makes sense, and they'd gone through all of their flying training, and then they maybe got to the last trip that they ever had to do in training and failed that, and they fell so much further.
Crushed.
So don't be afraid of failing, because actually in the long run you'll be much better at whatever you're trying to achieve for it, because A, you've got the tools, B, you overcome it, so that's another brick in your wall of evidence, and C, you won't have as far to fall. So I think that's that. And like I said, I did see people really struggle with that because they just didn't have experience of it. They hadn't ever had to face it before, and it was tough for them.
So even just mentally having to deal with the fact that you've made a mistake, and then overcoming it, they go, right, it's part of that whole debrief thing, isn't it? Again, it's learning.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, absolutely.
There's a question I like to ask everybody in this series, and it's a little bit about your flow state, right? So when your nervous system is in this kind of ventral vagal situation where you're not being shot at, but you actually are doing something that, and it might be that you're flying, but nowadays it might be something different, but there's something that you're doing where you're completely calm or relaxed, or for other people you're highly energized, but time just flies. What does that flow state or genius zone, what does that look like for you, and what are you doing?
So I think, my other half said to me the other day, he said, oh, are you bored? And I was like, what
Well,
do
we're
you
not
mean?
flying
He
anymore.
said, you don't fly jets anymore. Do you need, something to do? And I said, honestly, normal jogging is my happy place right now, because for the last 20 odd years, I had to wake up at different times every day. I had to go fly. I had to lead formations. I had to think about maybe having to go away for months at a time. And so it was very high stress. And it was a real emotional roller coaster. I think that's how I would describe being in the military. It's a real highs, real lows. And so now I think my flow is when I am running this house. Like we've got many moving parts. We've got children here, there, and everywhere. My other half is still in, so he's busy and in the Air Force, sorry. And so my flow is having all the food in the house that I need, getting people to their clubs, getting kids to school on time. And so when that's all sort of flowing, I am just so calm, so happy. And I find that that's my sort of happy place now. I don't need to be, I find the sort of the adrenaline rush of just sort of the administration of dealing with everything,
Just the right level of adrenaline.
That's it. Yeah. So I think that's like sort of my happy place flow at the minute. And then, obviously when Rosie and I are on stage, that's just brilliant. We come away buzzing. Absolutely love it. So I'm happy with not flying around at 600 miles an hour anymore.
You also said your nervous system was a bit of a wreck as well, because whenever you were doing the quick reaction alerts, it was like you had to kind of stay on a knife edge, but like not, and then try and sleep, but then not, and then be awake, and then be in a plane in 5 minutes and in the sky. So
that's it. You have to. I mean, you're sat for 90% of the day watching daytime TV, and then in an instant you have to be flying, and that could happen at any time of the day. I've been called out at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's really hard on your body. I mean, I remember getting airborne early in the morning, and this was in the tornado rather than the typhoon, but the navigator reminding me to take the afterburners out after takeoff, because I sort of woke up airborne because I'd done everything from muscle memory, because the switch, everything you're so well versed at doing that you almost do it by memory anyway. And we got airborne, and they said, Helen, you need to we're using too much fuel. You need to take the afterburners out. And I was like, oh, we're flying. Crikey. Which I don't think can be good for your heart, really. No. But it's intense, and you do that quite often, and it does start to sort of. I think I've got a few wrinkles and grey hairs because of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. So before we close, I'm just going to ask you, only because I'm going through this with my daughter at the moment, so I decided to ask all my guests this question, but what kind of advice would you give a young person today who's listening, or for parents who are struggling and listening? How do you feel about the future for our young people and in terms of career choices and things like that going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think it's exciting and terrifying, but I guess that it was for our parents as well.
Yeah, true.
I think, already I've noticed that any, little games that the kids are playing on their iPads or whatever, all the games have fake, like. It's just, as if it was on sort of Facebook or whatever. And he was like, oh, look how many likes I got. So my first lesson to her is going to be always just be yourself. You've got to be yourself. Don't worry about whether other people give you loads of likes. It doesn't matter what, to other people. You live your own life. And I think it's so easy to say, but yet so hard to do.
Yeah.
And I really want her to be okay with just living her own life,
how she wants
following
to.
her own path. As a military person would say, cut their own detail. But I was just about to say that and realised that no one else would understand the word I was
what you're
saying.
Talking about.
I slip into it every so often. So I think, first of all, just be yourself and be okay with that, even though that's easier said than done. And then just go for it. I mean, absolutely go for it. Because if you're okay with a setback, a failure, maybe someone saying no to you, well, nothing's really changed. you've at least gone for it, and you've tried, and okay, maybe this time you didn't succeed, but put that in your wall of evidence, because I bet you the next time you do, you won't fail, because you will have built many more skills, and you'll be more aware of what maybe you need to do or need to say at the interview, etc. So I think try and be yourself. Don't worry about what other people think, and go for it.
Nice.
I think are the three sort of key points for young people, which I think, like I said, are definitely easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's only one person that's going to say no to you, and it's you. So I think
that's true. That's true.
You've just got to give it a go.
Oh, thank you so much, Helen. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much.
So we were introduced by a mutual friend, so I'm very grateful to her. So I'm going to send her something to say thank you so much for it. And I think I'm just all the better for knowing that there are women like you and Rosie out there, just smashing these limiting beliefs about what women can do and what they can achieve. But also for anyone, male or female, who are coming out of military service, that it is possible to keep serving and to find an extension of that driving purpose that you have to protect and serve even out in the commercial world. So you're doing that too for men and women everywhere, Helen. You have this real ability to share your stories in a really engaging, even in a balanced way that just goes a long way to promoting the benefits of being open to opportunities, as you've said, even if they're not what you thought they would be at first, and you're kind of living testament for that. So if there's anybody listening today who wants to find out more about you and Rosie, and we're on a mission, where can they find you?
Well, we have a website, which is weareonamission.co.uk, and there's a little contact form at the end, which just they can fill in, and we'll get an email and we'll get back to them as soon as we can.
Lovely. And you're on LinkedIn and you post quite a bit there as well.
We are, yeah. We're on individually, but also we have a team site as well. So we try and keep people updated as to all the crazy places that we go and the wonderful people we speak to.
Love your content. Great. I'll pop that all in the show notes. Thank you so much, Helen.
Oh, thank you, Shelley. Thank you for your time. And bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
And that's it for this episode, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. So, what did you think about that? Helen's story is one packed with nuances of her pure grit, dedication, and taking hold of opportunities where they arose. For the small amount of time that I've gotten to spend with Helen, she comes across as someone who takes her sense of duty and responsibility really seriously. And while the RAF has fed this part to her for well over 2 decades, it's served her really well to mould the professional that she's become today out in the commercial world. What hit me about Helen's sharing was how even she, as a highly skilled fighter pilot, has flirted with imposter syndrome in the business world, even when she's literally been at the coalface of protecting our country in the air at breakneck speeds. This really puts my self-doubt to shame and makes me want to be braver and more like Helen. Finding a path to carefully balance who you are, what you do, and also what kind of human you are is a daily job we're all working through, especially when we're building or growing businesses or even just navigating change in our careers. People are flesh, bone and blood. Yes, that much we have in common. However, how we came to be, why we are here, and what drives us are all unique and flavoured with our own background stories, the decisions we've made, the experiences we've chosen to have, and of course, the joyful splash of our own unique personalities. Working on a personal brand strategy that's truly aligned with you and feels good to share with the world takes reflection and thoughtful crafting. If you're curious about doing this work with me, let's have a relaxed conversation about it. My details are in the show notes. So, who do you know who could do with hearing this conversation and Helen's story? Go on, share this episode. You know you want to. Until next time, my friends, stay strong, believe you have value, and make good brand decisions.
Thank you for listening to The Brand Compass. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with your entrepreneurial friends and help them make good brand decisions. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going at 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗢𝗘𝗟𝗟.com.